Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Monday, February 24th, 2020. And our top stories today, the end of the discount brokerage and why generational consultants exist. Well, joining me now is Devin Banerjee, Senior Financial Services Editor for LinkedIn. Hi, Devin. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Good to be with you.
It's good to see you. And I know you're in San Francisco. I feel so sad for you. You're not in the Grand Caymans. How are you dealing with that?
Not well. That was a great trip.
It was, and great reporting as always. So let's talk. I know you wanted to talk about the Morgan Stanley eTrade deal. What can you tell us there?
Yeah, big moves in the discount brokerage space. A second really big deal announced just in a matter of months. As you said, Morgan Stanley agreeing to acquire eTrade for about $13 billion. This comes on the heels of Charles Schwab's agreement to buy TD Ameritrade, creating in that instance this gigantic $5 trillion manager. And a lot of people are saying, look, this is really a sign of a death knell for discount brokerages. The entire business model, the entire game has changed. And so, free is the new normal. Scale is really important. And, zero commission brokerages have really become this kind of like loss leader or top of the funnel now to just bring, consumers into larger financial institutions that are trying to be one-stop shops basically for all of a consumer's financial needs. And that's really what we're seeing in the case of Morgan Stanley here. And being Morgan Stanley, this really also points to the investment banking model really diversifying and growing. We've seen this with Goldman Sachs starting its Marcus consumer business, which it's investing so heavily in. These banks really want to become one-stop shops as well and expand beyond the corporate clients, beyond the high net worth clients, and really start reaching everyday consumers. So in Morgan Stanley's case, what does this provide for them? Direct retail access with eTrade, a proven trading platform through eTrade, again, to complement its traditional wealth management and advisory services. A couple other themes that people are pointing to and I find really important. This really shows, again, as you and I talked about around the Schwab TD deal, which followed all of the traditional brokerages cutting their commissions to zero. This really shows how fintech, scrappy upstarts in fintech can really change the game. Yeah. Most people point to all of this beginning with Robinhood, the now 7-year-old startup that's amassed more than 10 million users in just a couple of years, using, again, that kind of top of the funnel of zero commission trades. So, fintech should really not be discounted. It can really change the game. It can reach consumers more directly, and then consumers demand change that leads traditional financial institutions to adjust. And another kind of underappreciated aspect to this is the regulatory environment. Following these two big deals with Morgan Stanley and Schwab, much more friendly. These companies are much more confident. There's a lot more confidence in the boardroom that transactions like this can get through after the kind of aftermath of the crisis and the recession during the Obama administration. So really a strong kind of signal and thumbs up for the M&A environment as well.
I have two questions for you, Devin. What does it mean for Robinhood now that Schwab, TD Ameritrade, Schwab goes to zero commission, Morgan Stanley obviously purchases eTrade? What does that mean? Does that potentially squeeze out these fintechs, or is it an attempt to squeeze out the fintechs? And then also with the consolidation, because it is consolidating, What does that mean ultimately for consumers?
Yeah, so in terms of Robinhood, there's a lot of discussion about what its options are going forward. I mean, of course, Robinhood is saying, it's committed to what it sees as its superior user experience and functionality, its appeal among younger investors, especially. Actually, just a couple days ago, last week, Robinhood came out and said it's starting a social element to its platform where people can connect over investment ideas and trades, which of course is kind of ahead of the game, at least technologically, than what these other brokerages are doing. So Robinhood really believes in that, but a lot of people were kind of the rumor mill was really spinning last week with people saying, look, some of these big banks that really want to reach the consumers are going to start looking at Robinhood. And I bet people are knocking on Robinhood's door and trying to get meetings with directors and with the two CEOs, I'm sure. In terms of consumers, I mean, look, they, what they want I think are more of these one-stop shops. So that's what they're getting. Of course, the concern in any consolidation environment is what happens down the line when there are fewer players who can then kind of start adding pricing in certain areas or demanding more for their users and customers attention and experience and products. So we'll see if that happens, but I think consumers have really hailed the drop in commissions. So that's happened so far, and now they have these one-stop shops, which ostensibly they've wanted for a while.
And I like the social aspect that you just brought up about Robinhood. I think that's that sense of community, that sharing of ideas, and we've seen that with other platforms. I think StockTwits is an example of that, where you can share themes, investor sentiment. So you kind of port that over, that example of that community over to Robinhood. Again, it gives you, more connectivity. At the end of the day, that's what you want. You want that stickiness.
Exactly.
I don't even know how to describe it. The stickiness of those individuals staying with you for a lifetime. That's what you want.
Certainly. I mean, it's a play for engagement, which all social networks and platforms, including the one I work at, are looking for. I would also say, I don't think this is too bold to say, but I personally think the growth of Robinhood and now this expansion into kind of a social dynamic is really a sign of the times. This bull market now stretching into year 11, almost year 12. And I wrote a story on Robinhood about 6 months ago, a deep dive profile into the company and the business. And, there are some people saying that, look, this is a sign of the times. Robinhood encourages everyday investors to trade a bit more. A social element is just going to encourage more trading. So that's not always a good thing. And so definitely a sign of the time, or a hashtag, this is the top type of signal, I think.
Well, you say Robinhood, I can't help but think of Kevin Costner, and I think of like rolling back the bow. It's probably not the image that Robinhood in particular wants, but every time we talk about this topic, that's the first thing that pops in mind, Devin.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, there's a lot of attention on Robinhood these days. It's still a pre-IPO company, so a lot of people looking for when that company may IPO. Now there are these kind of M&A rumors, at least rumors of big institutions that would be interested in having Robinhood as part of its platform. So a lot of attention on that company.
Yeah, it seems like they have really disrupted something that needs to be disrupted, and I think that gives hope to other fintech startups out there. It's a model certainly that they can follow. Devin, I want to hold you back. When we hold you for a moment, when we come back, we're going to talk to Devin about generational consultants. What exactly is that? Well, you're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. We're talking to Devin Banerjee, Senior Financial Services Editor for LinkedIn. Devin, thanks so much for sticking around this morning.
Absolutely, Jeff.
Well, it's great to talk with you. So let's go from brokerages now to generational consulting. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, really a sign of the times, Jeff. A rise in a new type of consulting called generational consultants. This was featured in the New York Times by Jasmine Hughes last week. And we saw a great conversation on the LinkedIn platform about what this means, what this says about the nature of work today. So today we have about 5 distinct generations in the workplace at once. You know, the traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen Xers, of course, the millennials, which is the largest cohort, and now Gen Zers. And each of them really takes a different mentality, a different approach to the nature of work, the nature of day-to-day work. And so there's been this rise of generational consultants. The Times featured one called Gen Guru, who are basically brought in to advise on hiring practices, onboarding, team building, day-to-day culture within companies, employee-manager relations, which is really important, and even things like, constructing benefits, constructing compensation, performance evaluations. And it goes to these different mentalities, as I said, among these different generations about how work is supposed to happen and how they want their day-to-day in their professions to go. And I would just point out, these 5 distinct generations at once really points to something you and I have talked about, which is a rise or at least a persistence of that older generation in the workforce, driven a lot of times by people who have not been able to save enough for retirement and don't feel comfortable retiring. So as of just last year, over 4% of people over the age of 85 in America are actually still working. So that's about 1 in 20 people of that age. And a lot of experts are saying, look, these generational consultants and thinking about approaches for different, types of workers is not dissimilar to personality assessments that a lot of companies use, or those Myers-Briggs tests and results that companies, or at least teams with companies, carry out with team members, and then kind of adjust, how the day-to-day work goes from there.
Yeah, and this has got to be the only instance I can think of where you actually have 5 generations in a workforce. And obviously every generation is going to have a different set of, I wouldn't say values maybe, or different ways of thinking about how they work. And it's going to be incumbent upon organizations, large and small, to figure out how to create teams that are very efficient and effective. Because the last thing you want is people not liking each other or disagreeing with each other and not being productive, not being effective. So the challenge is really on, I would think, for these corporations, large and small, organizations, large and small, to kind of try to marry all these people together. But it's a daunting task, Devin, because like I said, this has got to be the first time we've got 5 generations working together, and you got to make them, you got to treat them all equal in a way.
That too, yeah. But as you mentioned, culture and productivity is so important. But even just attracting this talent, retaining this talent in a really tight labor market today, where talent is really sought after and companies invest a lot in their talent and want to retain them, you have to think about all these different cohorts who kind of want different things, and so it's even more important today than ever, I think.
So Devin, yesterday on the podcast you talked about the LinkedIn study around family policies, and is this an example about the family leave policies is what I'm talking about? Is that an example where maybe that was something that was not, I don't know, frowned upon, but it's something that from a paternity leave, men did not take the leave, but now in rethinking that, maybe some younger generations, Gen Z, millennial, want that. That's an example where that's a policy put in place to accommodate.
You're absolutely right. I mean, benefits is something that have changed so much within companies, and that's really been driven by the newer workers, the younger workforce, who are saying, why do some policies apply to women and not men? Why do some policies apply to what companies deem as primary caregivers and not what they deem as secondary caregivers? So we did the study in financial services showing that the culture has still not really, the culture overall in those companies has still not really evolved, even as these companies' policies have started becoming more equitable for men and women, which is a great first step. But the culture is really not evolving because of, to be frank, that older generation that, as you alluded to, is still used to the way things used to be. So with these 5 generations in the workforce, there's kind of tension, or the culture is shifting a bit more slowly. Because there's still that more entrenched culture in the workforce. But you're absolutely right that these shifts in benefits and culture and team building are really being driven by these new generations entering the workforce.
And I seem to recall, Devin, that in querying some of these generations, whether the traditionalists or the boomers or the Gen Zers and the millennials, they all want to work with each other and they see the value in each other's perspectives. And as a manager, someone who's putting together a team, I would think that that's certainly a good sign. But when you're constructing a team, you want to have some of each, different points of view. And we've talked about that with board diversity makeups. But I got to think at the team level, building a team that can draw from experience, but also draw from the youth, the vigor, kind of some more modern ways to reform processes and protocols. That's, from a manager's point of view, it's got to be important.
Yeah, it's certainly important to have a diverse set of viewpoints and experiences around the table on a team. But a lot of managers just don't know how to foster a culture that's kind of accommodating and enjoyable for all of those different cohorts. A lot of managers are young today and haven't had experience with older workers, et cetera. And so that's created a huge ageism problem, which you and I have spoken about in the past. But as I said, this issue is really top of mind today, as companies are just really dying to hire and are struggling to attract and retain really high quality talent in a labor market this tight. So that's where these consultants are coming in. But I think, if you read this New York Times story, there's a lot of actionable insight in there for people who may be in management positions, and just keeping this top of mind and remembering that you kind of have to be flexible with different types of people, different types of workers. It's more important today than ever.
Yeah, well, that's the point of when we took the Myers-Briggs test many moons ago when I first got into work, because there were different types of people and you had to figure out how these different personality types work together. Now, in addition, you've got the layers of different generations with different moderately different beliefs and principles. So really interesting story, Devin. Pleasure seeing you, and thanks for joining us on the program, and look forward to talking to you later in the week on the podcast.
Always a pleasure, Jeff. Thanks.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a financial topic or someone of interest that you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, and so much more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. But if you're tired of the same